Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the what if. Wolves. Quote, Ichigo found Stark, but he was quickly wondering if it was even worth it. All the verbal abuse from Lilynette was giving him a headache, even if most of it was directed at Stark. Get you. This is the Arrancar that killed Neutra, don't you give a shit? Ichigo interjected. Oi, Squirt, I'm not an Arrancar. Stark didn't appear to give a shit, since he kept right on trying to sleep. He folded his arms over his face and groused, go away. She tried to pry him off the pillows, but to no avail. Get up. Noisy brat. He frowned over at Ichigo, looking at him for the first time. Go away. Ichigo rolled his eyes. This guy was even lazier than Shunsui. He had the feeling Stark knew he wasn't powerless, he just didn't seem to care. I'll go away if you agree to fight for me. Do I have to fight? Lilynette suddenly gave up and turned on Ichigo with a yell, sword drawn. Ichigo caught the curved blade, holding it up in the air, and consequently, Lilynette. She yanked on the sword, flailing around like a feral cat. Let go. Relax, Squirt. She didn't let go of the sword, he had to admit she was a determined little thing. Soul Society might get it in their head to come around and kill you, so how about this? If you agree to be on my side, I'll do the fighting for you. Stark just looked at him, but at least he was paying attention. He tried and failed to shake Lilynette off, continuing. You don't care who's in charge, right? He scratched his head, a clawed finger tracing the edge of a horn, almost forgetting it was there. We can fight over it if y'all really want, but I'd rather not. Stark looked to Lilynette and back, then draped his arms back over his face. He sighed. Whatever. Do what you want, you can be in charge. Well, that was easy. No kidding. He finally let the sword go and Lilynette fell on her ass with a squeak. It felt deserved after all her screeching. He didn't do too well with kids. See ya around, Stark. Lilynette jumped to her feet. Where do you think you're going, Spiky? We're not done fighting. The look her shot her was deeply incredulous. We're not. He took a swift step forward, poking her in the forehead with the pad of his finger. I win. She swayed back on her feet, blinking owlishly. Ichigo noticed how Stark's attention returned to him when he moved. He'd been ready to attack for keeps just then, he wasn't some pushover. He knew the Arrancar cared about her, and even if she was a part of his soul, he would never be able to hurt a kid, much less a young girl. See ya, Squirt. He left, and he found that the halls were suddenly crawling with Arrancar. At least, when he was taking a mile a step there seemed to be many. If they happened to be in his path he struck them down, leaving them alive, but otherwise he just ran past them, and they were none the wiser. He could sense stronger Reiatsu nearby, but it wasn't any he recognized. He assumed those were various Arrancar Frashin. He didn't see a reason to deal with them, it was their Espada leader he was interested in at the moment. He went back to where he'd left Grimmjow to wait for Yami to appear from wherever that black cube sent them. Unsurprisingly, Grimmjow was gone, and his Reiatsu was suppressed enough that he couldn't even feel it without concentrating. Smart move, to hide until he was recovered. He didn't have high-speed regeneration, so he was going to have a nasty scar unless he went to Zale for help, and if Grimmjow did what he expected, he wouldn't heal it, he'd keep it as a reminder of his loss. He couldn't judge the Espada, every loss he'd ever suffered was burned into his own soul. Orihime had healed all his wounds until there was no proof of his battles remaining. He didn't have the heart to tell her to leave the scars, he knew she would have taken it personally. Then she was gone, and every failure after her death couldn't be erased. He'd wanted the reminders for so long, once he finally had them, he couldn't stand them. He thought he knew what he wanted, but once he had it, he still wasn't satisfied. He sat on top of one of the tall cylinder-like buildings that were sinking into the sand, waiting in comfortable silence. After all that running around, a nap sounded great, but he still had plenty of enemies here. So far, he hadn't sensed Barragan move at all, so he could only assume the self-proclaimed king thought he didn't have to. He mused, is it presumptuous to hope his abilities won't work on me? Aizen had to beat him somehow, right? He doesn't feel all that strong. There's still the possibility he'll be able to hurt us. It doesn't hurt to be cautious, Ichigo. Our Reiatsu is darker, more oppressive, we'll just grind him into dust like everyone else. I guess we could just hit him with overkill and go into Bankai. Sounds fun. If superior Reiatsu is not enough, we will retreat and attempt to earn the favor of the Vizards. Wouldn't count on it, Asan. You saw how they looked at me. I'm still a stranger, a dangerous stranger. They might get in contact with Kazuki to double-check my story, but we have a lot of work to do before they trust me any further than they can throw me, which is, not at all. Don't underestimate yourself, Ichigo. Your confidence and strength inspires loyalty. Ichigo felt his thoughts drift towards Aizen. He couldn't help comparing himself to the man, even after he was dead. You aren't wrong, Ichigo, you share traits with Aizen. It's perhaps the reason he allowed you to live for so long, but don't dwell on them. You're a protector. People flock to you not simply because you are strong. Aizen was a destroyer. Am I not playing God just by being here? King, you got no delusions about your own mortality. In the end we'll all rot. Baragon doesn't seem to understand. Make him understand. He understood. They shared a heart. He knew he didn't need to answer aloud. They both had their ways of trying to clear his conscience and doubts, and he had to admit, they weren't doing a bad job. The wind tugged his hair, resting his arm on his knee. He could stay in this form for days without consequences. He had plenty of Raryoku to spare, but it muddled his thoughts, and he didn't like to stay this way. Zangetsu's voice was loud, pervasive. His instincts were more than suggestions, they were near impulse. He waited eagerly for the Arrancar to appear, his bloodlust in this form never truly sated. He appeared at ease, but he was more high-strung than a stalking cat. He was just waiting for his prey to show itself. Cutting through Yami's Hiero might actually take some effort. The bastard was tough. He was looking forward to having a punching bag. He had to wait over an hour before the distortion in the air shimmered into existence. The tank of an Arrancar appeared, expression twisted in rage and annoyance. He scanned the area for Ichigo, his Reiatsu spiking around him murderously. Ichigo stood, flexing his hands and stepped forward, putting himself directly in front of him. The Arrancar was furious, and seeing what he assumed was a weak hollow before him, he lashed out without even bothering to see if he was an ally. Ichigo lifted his arm, stopping his punch with no effort at all. Trash, he hissed. You're going to have to try harder than that. What was that? I said. Ichigo moved again, his short sword suddenly at the giant's throat. You're going to have to try harder. Blood ran along the edge of the blade, clearly enough to cut into his Hiero. Almost before he could finish, the Arrancar swat at him with an open palm like he was a fly. Maybe a few years ago, he'd have managed to hit him, but it was like watching someone swing a baseball bat. It was achingly slow and unskilled. The only thing he had going for him was endurance and raw strength. If he couldn't even touch him, it was pointless. He moved again, standing behind him. Release your sword. Wouldn't wanna kill ya on accident. Yami lashed out, spinning, drawing his sword with a shout. Enrage, Ira. The giant's Reiatsu exploded in a flash of red, his power surging skyward. He revealed his giant form, obnoxiously huge. It was a good thing he'd never released his sword in the human world. It really would have been bad. This level of power was better, but not good enough. He backed up, but it wasn't because he was scared. He wanted him to actually try to hit him with a Sero. You're just like the rest, you're all ants. Yami opened his jaws, a bright red Sero forming before it. He shot it straight at him, the beam tearing through the space and sending sand flying in all directions. Ichigo lifted his sword, deflecting the Sero with a slash of his sword. It spiraled off into the desert, the beam taking out 2 crumbling buildings before spiraling off into the desert. The beam dissipated, Yami screaming obscenities at him. Let him rage, he wanted to see his final form. He lifted his trench knife, eyes narrowing. Getsuga, power bloomed along the edge of the blade, whipping around him. Yami wasn't as stupid as he looked. He lifted his arms to guard. He slashed downward, his energy ripping toward Yami in a streak of black and red. Tensho. The power hit Yami square on, some of it just cascading off of his Hiero like water, but his defense wasn't strong enough to completely defend against it. The darkness of his Reiatsu faded away, and Yami was already readying another Sero. He crossed the distance, drawing his other sword, and instead of deflecting, he hit his Sero point blank with a two-handed Getsuga. It shattered his Sero, his Getsuga lashing into his face and chest. Yami howled in pain and anger, his face a bloody mess. He shouted, spraying blood. Nothing can stand against my rage. I'm the Sero Espada, no one can defeat me. I'll rip off your arms and feed them to you. He easily dodged his punches, his voice thick with disdain. Is this it? You're boring me. He ran circles around him, it was starting to get impatient. A few punches later, and the Espada's rage peaked, his form changing. His wounds healed, his form condensing into something more ape-like. He lost all his legs, his tail thrashing behind in rage. Ichigo eyes narrowed, annoyed. Better, but still not good enough. No one was good enough. A decade in the past, King, of course they're weak. Why is it so infuriating? You've always craved battle, King, don't deny it. You love the challenge, the stakes, violence. Show this fucker what real power looks like. Zangetsu's desires were his own. He didn't bother fighting them, he shared them. He wanted to fight, and Yami was disappointing. He dodged another Sero, not bothering to destroy it. He didn't know how to analyze a power level and match it to cancel it out like Urahara. He wasn't complicated, he just obliterated it with pure power. He crossed his blades in front of one another, Reiatsu rippling along the edge. Getsuga Tensho. He slashed with both blades, dark Reiatsu cutting the sky. The arc of his attack sliced straight through the Arrancar's shoulder and chest. He'd ripped his Hiero to shreds, he didn't even compare to Aizen. Ichigo stood in the air above him when he fell, not comprehending that he'd lost, to someone seemingly powerless. The Arrancar was bleeding out, he'd lost an arm, and the damage to his chest was considerable. He was done. He sheathed his swords, scowling down at him. Yami's Resurrection faded away, and he was looking down at the defeated Dai's Espada. His blood stained the sand, his rageful expression relaxing in death. Ichigo still wasn't satisfied, he grit his teeth, sheathing his swords. The cloth wrapped around them, turning away from Yami in disgust. A familiar, quiet voice caught his attention. You're strong. He turned, seeing Ulquiorra standing at the edge of the broken wall of Las Noches. He looked just as bored as usual, but he had the feeling he was tense. Yami was a brute, but he wasn't weak. Are you not satisfied? His eyes narrowed. No. He leaned into his Sonido, appearing beside Ulquiorra. To the Arrancar's credit, he didn't flinch. If I thought you would be a challenge, I might have pursued a fight with you too. It wasn't an insult, just fact. He looked over, and saw the slight frown on Ulquiorra's face. If it was because he was insulted, he couldn't tell. The Arrancar was such a nihilist, he couldn't get a read on him. Ulquiorra said, why does this frustrate you? He wasn't expecting the question. I want to win, but I miss the challenge. Ulquiorra just stared at him, and he couldn't get a read on him. He continued, what do you want, Ulquiorra? The Arrancar said nothing, watching him for a long moment before he walked away, hands in his pockets. Why he came to watch, Ichigo didn't understand, but the Arrancar was a puzzle. He let him leave, so long as he wasn't going to get in his way, he honestly didn't care what he did. He didn't understand why the Arrancar followed Aizen to being with. Maybe it was simply because the Shinigami was strong. He just didn't know, nor was he sure he cared to. He left, one thing left to tackle. The self-proclaimed king of Hueco Mundo, Baragon. He couldn't say he was nervous, just uncertain how difficult the fight would be. He moved with Sonido, but he didn't put his back into it, he took his time getting there. He couldn't imagine how angry the Saotaicho was going to be when he figured out what he was doing. He hadn't been entirely forthcoming, he didn't have much interest in working with Soul Society. He wasn't their enemy, but he didn't want them to meddle either. He didn't have a problem with the captains, most of them anyways, he just didn't agree with how Soul Society ran things. He was interrupted on his way to Baragon. He was searching for a Espada-level Reiatsu, so he almost missed the energy that converged on him. He stopped, facing the Arrancar with a small frown. Tessera. The blonde glared, nearly trembling in rage. I finally found you. It was you. You killed him. You. He didn't deny it, and he didn't apologize. Death always wrought strife, no matter how justified it felt. He'd like to think he was prepared for this, but he never was. The tears that streaked Tessera's face only reminded him of his own pain. Tessera drew his sword, lunging for him in a sloppy strike. Ichigo stepped to the side, lazily dodging. This was just pathetic. Tessera shouted, "Draw your sword. Am I not good enough for you?" He dodged another couple of strikes, doing his best not to engage. He had no idea why Tessera cared, or what bond he'd had with the Espada, but he wouldn't invalidate his feelings. His sorrow was real, and he didn't know how to confront it. Tessera grew annoyed when he wouldn't retaliate, seeming to understand that if he'd killed Neutra with such ease, he didn't stand a chance. This was suicide, plain and simple. His attacks grew more and more frenzied, and even though he had only seen the Arrancar briefly in the past, the shift in personality was enough to unnerve him. Tessera fell to his knees, hands tight around his sword. He hadn't released it, so maybe he knew how pointless it was to fight. His hands and his voice shook. "Will you not even grant me this? Look at him, he hates ya, he wants this. Leaving him alive would be unwise." 3-1 then, even Tessera wanted to die. He didn't like this, it felt wrong, like putting someone down. He drew the trench knife, reluctant. Tessera tensed like he was going to move again, but before he could, Ichigo thrust the sword forward, straight into his chest. Tessera grit his teeth then coughed up blood, leaning onto the sword. He gripped the blade, muttering to himself. He wasn't supposed to die first. Tessera went limp, and Ichigo drew his sword back and out of his chest. The Arrancar hit the ground with a wet sound, his Reiatsu fluttering with his heart. This was the part he hated the most. Was this mercy, or was he just being arrogant? He sheathed his sword and left him to bleed out, continuing toward Berrigan. He was in a strange mood, feeling rather apathetic. Should he be upset? He thought he should. He hadn't wanted to kill Tessera, but it wasn't because he actually cared about the Arrancar, it was because he knew he probably should feel something. He came to a large, high-ceilinged room, a simple stone throne carved out of the far wall. On that throne sat Berrigan, wrinkled face set in confidence and arrogance. "So you finally showed up." His Zanpakuto was already released, the axe leaning against the throne. Clearly he was anticipating a fight. No matter how arrogant he was, he at least realized he couldn't attempt to fight with an unreleased sword. There were more than a few of low-level Arrancar in the room, but none looked ready to interfere, so Ichigo ignored them. He drawled, "That's an annoying expression. It reminds me of him." He leaned back in the throne. "I suppose I should be thanking you for getting rid of him. But you won't." Ichigo drew his swords, resting the Kyber sword on his shoulder. "Do you presume to order the King of Las Noches as well, Gaki?" "Noah." Ichigo looked around the room at the weaker Arrancar gathered there, fixing them with a cold look. "Run, if you don't wanna die." His attention turned back to Berrigan. "I'm going to kill you." Berrigan threw his head back and laughed, mocking and long. "A powerless child thinks he can destroy me." Ichigo said nothing, and if the laughter bothered him, it didn't show. He moved both swords, raising both side by side above him. Reiatsu gathered around him and Zangetsu, and even if he couldn't feel it, he knew he'd see it. A handful of Arrancar seemed to understand this wasn't a good place to be. The handful of smart ones ran, but those that were fearful of Berrigan remained. Bankai. Light exploded around him, and when it cleared, his swords were one, the innermost part of the blade black, the outer part of the blade pure white. A chain ran from the hilt to the middle of the sword quite a bit larger than his shikai. Tensa Zangetsu. Berrigan stood, lifting his axe before him. Rot, Arrogante. Ichigo held Tensa Zangetsu before him, watching as the Arrancar turned to bones, the skeleton wrapping bony fingers around a black, massive battle axe. Its jaw dropped in a laugh, taking a step forward. Respira. The miasma crawled across the ground towards him, and Ichigo let his power climb, holding his position. The Arrancar in the room that were holding out suddenly turned to run, realizing how stupid it would be to remain. "You sure about this? Think I'd let your dumbass fight if this was the end? He's just another living thing, scared to die." The miasma reached his sword, he felt it whisper over the surface, but nothing happened. His grip tensed as it crawled up to reach his hands, and as it passed over his skin, he realized he was fine. "Impossible. That's right. you're just an Arankar, you're no god. In the end, all you have is Reiatsu. He narrowed his eyes and took a step forward, yellow eyes blazing with determination. The Skeleton King screamed, "Rot!" He lurched forward, hefting his axe and slicing down. "Why won't you die?" Ichigo blocked an attack meant to decapitate him, feet sliding back an inch before he held firm. "Because you're weaker." He pushed against his weapon, then completed his strike down with a snarl. Getsuga Tensho. Black and blue energy flooded the room, disintegrating the throne and the back wall. His Reiatsu cut the air, sharp and brutal. It spiraled out of existence, the Skeleton King half destroyed. His skull was crumbling, jaws spread in a furious scream. "Nothing can stop time." Ichigo chuckled, finding dark amusement in that statement. "I already have. Nothing stands between me and what I want." He'd defied logic and turned back time, courtesy of the hogyoku, but he'd still managed it. He'd killed a man who thought himself a god. One arrogant king wasn't going to stop him now. He snapped his hand out, gripping the crumbling skull, and slammed him down to the ground, shattering it beneath his palm. His eyes widened, catching a bony arm before his axe could touch him. He charged a Sero between his horns. "I'm king now." He shot his Sero, dark red Reiatsu rippling out in a wave to crush the Arankar beneath him and the surrounding walls. He straightened, orange hair whipping around him as his Reiatsu returned to him. There was nothing left of the Arankar but pieces of his crown and dust that was already blowing away in the sands of Hueco Mundo. He looked up at the gaping hole his attack had made in the wall. It had kept going, shattering the dome of Las Noches. For some reason, this seemed ideal. The false sun only reminded him of Aizen. Hueco Mundo was a place of darkness and silence, the faux sky was unsettling, fake. The scattered stone that had already begun to sink under the sand was the only remaining evidence of the throne. A throne Aizen had desired, that Barragan had assumed. His grip on his sword tightened, chain clinking when he turned to face Las Noches. He let his energy flare, lowering it to what the Arankar could feel. He spread his energy throughout all of Las Noches as a beacon. Arankar were drawn to power, and he had plenty of it. His Reiatsu washed over every living thing in Las Noches, commanding and oppressive, but without violence. He'd killed all he needed to, he had no more desire to kill that day. He turned Tensa Zangetsu over, stabbing it into the ground. He could call his sword to his hand when he wanted it, it was of no consequence to let it go. He and Zangetsu were one in the same, he was no more separated from his sword than he was from his own mind. He sensed the Reiatsu of the Espada he'd left alive converging. Out of curiosity or fear or otherwise, he couldn't say. They were all so different, and he knew who they had once been, not who they actually were. His eyes flicked over to Haribel's, then her Frashin. Ulquiorra showed up, even if he hung back, casually scanning the damage he'd caused. Grimjow was there, looking a little worse for wear, but he had his Frashin at his back. Stark and Lilynet were next, followed by hundreds of Arankar whose numbers he'd probably never know. They were scattered on and around the rubble and exposed levels of the floors above them. He sensed Zamari and his Frashin, but no Nell. He even sensed Zale, but now wasn't the time nor the place. He waited until any who cared to listen were there. He'd spoken to battle-weary Shinigami, his friends and his enemies, but it was a first to be standing before a group as a king. Zangetsu reminded him, no weakness. He stepped forward and called, Hueco Mundo is mine. Challenge me if you think you can take it. No one stepped forward, that was unsurprising. I'm king. He stepped forward to the center of the group with Sonido, several Arankar flinching back. He saw the instinct to run flash in their eyes, and he could tell the only thing that kept them rooted in place was the instinct that running before a stronger predator was a death sentence. He lifted his hand, Tensa Zangetsu spiraling through the air to his palm. It nearly grazed one Arankar, but he'd been careful no one was in its path when he called it. Aizen asked you to change your nature when he took control. He kept you like whipped dogs. Barragan kept you like hounded strays. He hissed, are you dogs? He turned a full circle, meeting the eyes of any Arankar with balls enough to do it. They all looked away, even Grimjow. He was angry, for their sakes and his own. Soul Society had used him much the same way. They had played their part in what he was, and they washed their hands of any responsibility. You can go back to fighting to be top dog, scavenging in the desert, waiting for the day a Shinigami comes around to put you down. I won't fucking stop you." He paused, waiting to see if anyone wanted to leave. No one did. "Or you can stay with me, you can be wolves. Aizen made you perfect, Arrancar, but he failed to see your potential. I can make you stronger." He looked around the gathered Arrancar, and saw mostly eagerness. He asked, "Any objections?" The Arrancar that were brave enough to take their eyes off him looked around, but no one spoke up, and he'd never met a shy Arrancar. A terrified female Arrancar near the back spoke up, but there was something like adoration in her voice. What do we call you?" "White," she murmured, "White Heika." She was far off, but he still heard it. He hoisted Zangetsu to his shoulder, chain clinking. "Can't stand honorifics. Just White." The Arrancar tensed like he might kill her, and he did her the courtesy of completely ignoring her. He continued, "I only have 2 rules. First, leave the humans alone. That means to stay out of the human world. Second, leave the Shinigami alone unless they engage with you first." Grimmjow shouted, "You telling us to run away?" Ichigo turned to face him, unamused. "If you go after a lion cub, what happens, Grimmjow? You bring the whole pride down on your head." Grimmjow ground his teeth, annoyed, but he bit his tongue. Ichigo addressed all of them after that, his eyes lingering on those he knew were hot-headed and impulsive. "I don't intend to start a war with the Shinigami if I can't help it." Harabel's voice was low, but still cut through the anxious murmurs of the Arrancar. "Then you've considered it. It may be unavoidable. My goal isn't to watch you all be cut down, my goal is for Hueco Mundo to be left the fuck alone." Grimmjow spoke up again, angry. "So you want peace? Whose side are you on?" Ichigo wasn't swayed, he didn't need to smother dissent like Aizen had. Better to have misgivings dealt with in the open than letting them fester in the dark. "Do you think if I wasn't on your side I would be here at all? It would be far easier to just kill you all and be done with it, but I'm some sort of fool and I want you all to live." "Why?" He didn't know who asked the question, but it didn't matter. "Because I'm one of you. If you deserve to die, so do I." He didn't want to linger on his reasons, some of them hadn't even happened in this timeline yet. Quote. He tapped a clawed finger on the hilt of his sword, still balancing it on his shoulder. He drawled, "A king needs a queen." He wasn't being serious about her being his queen, but he was serious about giving her control. Harabel. He looked up at her, several hundred pairs of eyes settling on her. She didn't seem fazed, her reiatsu spiking around her as a not-so-gentle reminder she wasn't to be trifled with. Some weaker Arrancar's knees hit the ground, but none looked ready to challenge her. He found that impressive. No words at all, and yet no one stepped up to question her authority. Was it wise to build up his own army in Hueco Mundo? Probably not, but he could shield them from Soul Society for as long as he could. He'd always led with his heart, not his head. He waved a hand in casual dismissal and turned his back. "Now scram." That's all I had to say. There was no real threat in his words, just a boredom they all knew could very easily shift into the homicidal range. Most were eager to leave, but it was agonizing to let Zale just walk away, but it still wasn't the right time. He wanted to hold Grimmjow back, but in front of the others it would just look like he intended to punish him, so he would have to put that conversation on hold. He met Harabel's eyes and she stayed behind, waiting until they were alone. Her fashion hung back, watching Ichigo nervously as Harabel crossed the distance to them. He let his Bankai go, sheathing both swords, and she asked, "What are you, White?" He sensed genuine curiosity in her voice. In this form, he had the black Shihakusho, but it was a bit different. It wasn't solid black, it was streaked with white. He asked her before if it mattered, and if she was asking again, clearly it did. He answered, "I'm a mutt. If I trusted you, maybe I would tell you." He wasn't willing to tell any of these Arrancar he still had a human body. It was a huge weakness, and one he couldn't afford. "Where do you intend to go?" He looked at her, wondering how she could know he didn't intend to stay. He hadn't thought he'd been that obvious about it, but Harabel was sharp. "The human world." He looked at her and smirked. "Hypocrite, I know. I'm going to try to keep Soul Society from sticking their noses in our business. It would help immensely if you kept the rest of the Arrancar on their best behavior. She studied him, then asked, "Why are you so intent on making us stronger? You appear to be in a hurry. Too sharp for your own good, Harabel. Or maybe I'm too transparent." He shrugged off the thought. "Don't worry about it too much. Focus instead on the problems right under our noses. I might have killed Aizen, and he might have mucked up Soul Society, but the Arrancar will be seen as a threat to be rid of. I'm strong, but there's just one of me. Then it appears you do not have the luxury of failure." She turned to leave, and paused. "Do not remain away for long." It was a warning, and one that he thought he already had a firm understanding of. He only nodded, stepping into a Garganta. Yeah. He didn't dare open a Garganta directly to Karakura. He chose a city at random, then went from there to another, then to Karakura, making damn certain he was alone. It was night in Karakura, but he had no idea what day it was. Time did funny things when you crossed between worlds. He just knew he was tired. He went to Urahara's shop, and despite the hour, the ex-captain was waiting for him outside. Kazuki gave him a once-over and a grim smile. "Kurosaki-san, you've been busy, haven't you?" He couldn't deny it, and he knew lying to the man was futile. Kazuki gestured at Ichigo vaguely and said, "Before you come in, maybe you do something about that. Rukia-san is still here, she might be a bit startled." He blinked, then looked down, nearly having forgotten. "Oh yeah." He closed his eyes and let out a long, slow breath. He felt his hollow power sink back into the depths of his soul, and when he opened his eyes again, they were decidedly human. Better. Kazuki turned, and Ichigo followed, less hungry than he expected. Maybe it was because of the reishi-thick environment of Hueco Mundo, or simply his anxiety keeping it at bay. He asked, "How long was I gone?" Kazuki led him back to the sitting room. "About 3 days." He pushed open the screen, and Ichigo paused when his eyes fell on Rukia. There were dark circles under her eyes. She looked tired, but compared to how she'd looked when she'd been certain she was about to die, she looked amazing. "Ichigo." Kazuki suddenly disappeared, leaving them alone. Ichigo stopped hovering in the doorway, then sat down across from her cross-legged. He resisted the urge to worry his lip, then bent in half, his forehead nearly touching the table. "I'm sorry I wasn't here." Having something ripped out of her soul couldn't have been pleasant, and he felt somewhat responsible for it. Her brows furrowed, annoyance slipping into her tone. "Ichigo, don't apologize for that. You don't mean it." "I do." He straightened, watching her. "Just because I don't have regrets doesn't mean I can't be sorry it had to happen." He looked at the wall, trying to sense if anyone else was there. She answered his unspoken question. "Ni-sama returned to Soul Society with the hogyoku, Renji is staying in the other room. He's not guarding me, he just insisted." "Ah, I see." He stared back at her, sensing that wall between them. He was different and she could sense it. It made things unnecessarily awkward. Rukia blurted, "Why did you go to Hueco Mundo?" "Soul Society knows then." She slammed her hand down on the table, raising her voice. "Of course they do." He sighed, leaning forward on his knees. "I took Aizen's army from him, and I made myself king." Her eyes widened. "Be serious, Ichigo." "I am." She seemed to be in denial, searching him for some sign this was a joke. Why? Lots of reasons. Telling her she wouldn't understand felt too cliché, and he wasn't sure he could articulate them anyways. "Soul Society thinks you've..." She couldn't bring herself to finish that statement. "It'll be okay, Rukia." "How? You're not even a hollow, how is what you're doing even reasonable?" "Rukia." She was starting to get hysterical, and if that happened, the conversation would be over. He pulled on his soul, feeling Zangetsu's power rise up to meet him. He became solid, he could sense his presence standing behind him. Before Rukia could panic, he explained, "This is Zangetsu, my inner hollow, and the source of my Shinigami power." Yo. Her eyes were wide, looking between Zangetsu and Ichigo. "But how? Did I? I was born like this, it's not anyone's fault." He shrugged, "He's not half bad anyways." Zangetsu folded his arms and scoffed, "You're not half bad." Ichigo rolled his eyes, waving his hand and cutting off his Reiatsu. Zangetsu disappeared back inside his soul, leaving Rukia struggling to keep up. She said, Do you have any idea the kind of trouble you're about to be in? Yep, I have a damn good idea. His tone was light, but he wasn't fooled. He knew how bad things could get. He let out a tired sigh. Rukia, it was a hell of a lot of trouble saving you, but I did it anyway. Sometimes I do things and it doesn't make sense, but I always have a reason. She asked, will you share those reasons? Maybe. He got up with a yawn. Look, twerp, let's talk tomorrow. We're both tired. He was brushing her off, but for a genuine reason. He was beat, he needed to rest, and he needed to get back in his real body. She got up and moved to the hall, pausing to wait for Ichigo to join her. Sleep well. He frowned at her, wondering if that was a reference to his nightmares. He was too tired to keep thinking about it, shaking it off. Night, Tiny. He caught a small grin on her lips as she passed by him. He went to his own room, manifesting Zangetsu almost immediately. He was tired, but on edge, especially after all of that. He laid there on the ground, staring at the ceiling. Zangetsu sat against the wall in the corner, his eyes on the door in the room, ready to protect him at a moment's notice. It was going to be a long night. Splintered. He slept terribly, which was no shock, and once he finally did make it to sleep, time passed in a blur of half-remembered nightmares. He woke with a jolt when Zangetsu touched him. Friends are here. Thought you'd want to wake up. Seemed Zangetsu had anticipated some form of violence from the way he was gripping his wrists. He couldn't be sure if he'd done anything, but if he had, he knew Zangetsu could handle it and likely had handled it. Zangetsu could just as easily wake him without touching him, but he had a feeling the hollow did it on purpose to test his reflexes. He could tell him to cut it out, but he wasn't sure if Zangetsu didn't have the right idea to begin with. He let him go, sitting back while Ichigo stretched. Thanks. Zangetsu disappeared back into the depths of his soul as he got up. He needed to spend time in his body again, so he left his room, found it, and noticed a few keto-laced bracelets on the wrist of his body. Tessai caught him studying them and explained their purpose. One was to help suppress his power, one was to help contain his soul, and the third was to help him ease back into his body without killing himself. His soul was massive compared to what it had been at this point in his timeline. If he wanted to be able to keep hopping in and out of his body, he'd need to take it slow. He returned to his body, flexing stiff muscles. He played with the braided bracelets with a frown. One was pink, one was seafoam green, and the other was pastel purple. They were girly, and he had no doubt it was Kazuki's doing. Kazuki appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. How's it feel? Suffocating, uncomfortable. He got up, stretching some more with a wince. But not painful. He flexed his hand, considering that. No. Kazuki smiled. Then it's working. He explained. You might start to notice rapid aging as your body changes to accommodate your soul. That's normal for a boy your age. He made a face. Gross. Did you really have to word it like that? He held up his arm to show the bracelets. And did you have to make them fucking friendship bracelets? Kazuki hid a smirk behind his fan. Self-conscious. Ichigo, your sisters will be so jealous. Yeah, he scowled, but didn't take them off. It was a thank you if he'd ever given one, and he knew the captain was aware of it. Kazuki gave Tessai a look, the Shinigami leaving the two alone. The ex-captain reluctantly changed the subject. Did you sense another hogyoku while you were away? No. Why? Kazuki frowned. It's come to my attention that Soul Society didn't find another hogyoku on Aizen's person or in his lab. They don't seem to be aware there are two. You didn't tell them. I didn't. Kazuki didn't press as to why he would have done that, and for that he was grateful. He had no doubt Kazuki was monitoring Mayuri's every move, so when he said they hadn't found anything, he believed him. You think Aizen might have hidden it in Hueco Mundo? He had no reason to believe anyone could stop him. It would have been the safest place for it. Where do you think he hid it? Kazuki frowned. I can't say. His tone was light, but there was still gravity in his words. Do keep an eye out for it, Kurosaki-san. Ichigo was just as concerned about this as Kazuki. He thought for sure they would have found it on his body or at the very least in his lab. His thoughts drifted to Zale, wondering if it was his bias or simply paranoia that drew him to mind. Kazuki seemed to read his mind. asking, "You have someone in mind?" "It's creepy when you do that." He was very, very glad Kazuki was on his side. Or at the very least, not working against him. He wasn't an idiot, but compared to Kazuki, he might as well be. He answered reluctantly, not because he didn't want him to know, but for selfish reasons. "An errand car. He's a sick Sanuva bitch, but he's smart." Kazuki was perceptive. He caught the hatred in his voice, as well as his use of present tense. "You didn't kill him." "I haven't decided what I want to do with him yet." Zangetsu's voice in his head was uncharacteristically soft, but woven with hatred and malice. "I thought we were going to slowly torture him to death. We could hack off all those goddamn tentacles, his limbs, string his guts out, bleed him dry. Then we let the fuck resurrect himself, and we do it all again." "Stop." His hands were clenched into fists, realizing he'd spoken aloud. It wasn't that he was opposed, he was far too invested. "That's a scary look, Kurosaki-san." Kazuki watched him warily, thoughtfully. Ichigo's eyes narrowed, not particularly fond of being studied so intently. Zangetsu didn't stop, probably because he could feel Ichigo's interest as clear as his own. "You remember what he did, we still have to pay it back in full. That fucker didn't suffer enough and, you know it, King." He did remember, even if it was hazy. He remembered hate and pain and fear and rage. He closed his eyes and hissed, "Stop. I'm angry, King, and I know you're angry too. It's not the time nor the place. Coulda called on the old man to push me back, but you didn't. It's 'cause you like it, you like the rage, so why do you deny it? Can't lie to me, King." He opened his eyes with a small frown, letting Zangetsu have the last word. He was right, he was angry. It seemed too small a word to describe the clawing feeling in his chest and throat. He looked up at Kazuki again, who hadn't moved at all. He had no idea how long he'd been standing there trying to collect himself, but the ex-captain only watched knowingly. He felt the need to explain himself. Hollow. Kazuki already knew that much, but from the look in his eyes, the Shinigami was trying to connect the dots. He didn't like losing control, so he decided to tell him before he guessed, because at least then it was on his own terms. Shielaporo grants. He's Mayuri's wet dream. He's weak, but smart, and stark raving mad. I got caught, and he had me for long enough. I killed him, but now he's alive. Careful, Kurosaki. Kazuki's eyes narrowed. Vengeance can be an all-consuming thing. Don't tear up wounds that haven't even begun to heal. Ichigo's lips curled in a snarl. But it felt so good. "And how do you feel now?" Kazuki's voice was gentle, but firm. "Empty. Kurosaki-san, do what's best for you." Those words struck a chord in his chest. He looked back at him, realizing something. "You blame yourself for me, don't you?" Kazuki pulled his hat down, and said nothing. Kazuki had awakened his power, his hollow, and he'd sent his friend's son into Soul Society to do what he couldn't, involving him in a war he had no business being a part of. But Ichigo didn't blame him, he couldn't. Ichigo said, "Most of the things I remember never happened here, but you're too smart for your own good. You see the end result and you fill in the blanks, don't you?" He sighed, running his hand through his hair. It was short in his body, he wasn't used to it yet. His voice was quiet, not entirely comfortable bearing his feelings, but Kazuki was hurting himself for what Ichigo deemed to be no reason. "I've always wanted power, Kazuki, and you helped me get it. You taught me more than I think you realize, and I owe you everything. You didn't involve me, Aizen did. Please don't blame yourself for this. You should know how difficult that is, Kurosaki-san." It had to be said. The silence he felt from Zangetsu was enough to prove Kazuki's words had reached him too. Some things were clear to him, but others were muddled and uncertain. He started past him into the hall, pausing. "Thanks, Kazuki." The Shinigami hung back, and he saw a cat out of the corner of his eye pad over to his feet. He went to the front of the shop, sensing Renji some distance away, and concluded he'd only leave Rukia if it was on orders. He heard Rukia and Orihime chatting before he saw them. Chad was waiting nearby in silence, and even if he said nothing, even if he couldn't see his eyes past that mop of hair, he could tell he was worried. "Hey guys." Orihime turned, her face lighting up. "Ichigo, you were gone longer than we thought, I'm glad you're okay." Everyone was so worried. It was still so jarring to see her so happy, so unaffected. He wanted her to stay that way. Of course I'm fine. I'm always okay, aren't I? Ichigo. Chad's voice was deep, a bit monotone, but he couldn't dismiss the worry he heard buried in it. Ichigo looked at him a long moment, then looked to Rukia and Orihime. We'll be back in a bit. Orihime shifted, uncertain what to say. Okay. Kurosaki-kuna. He left, hands in his pockets, and Chad followed. They walked side by side for a while, and when the silence stretched, he knew his friend was waiting for him to talk. He was always impressed by how demanding he could be without saying anything at all. He walked until they were at the riverbank, a place both of them were familiar with, but also a place he knew even his friend was beginning to feel estranged from. It's hard, you know. You're exactly who I remember you to be, but I'm different, it changes things, and I don't know how to fix it. Ichigo. You don't have to fix anything. Ichigo walked to the riverbank, bending down to pick up a smooth stone. He turned it over in his fingers. It's lonelier than I thought it would be. He skipped the rock, and 3 skips in it tumbled beneath the surface. I missed you all so much. Now that I have you back, it feels like there's a wall between us. I'm going through the motions, but you feel like ghosts. He felt Chad reach for him, and he tensed. His friend didn't touch him, dropping his hand. Ichigo wasn't sure whether he was disappointed or relieved. Chad said, I don't understand, Ichigo, but you can help me understand. Ichigo wasn't sure if he wanted him to. It wasn't his burden to bear. Talk to him, Ichigo. If you respect your friend, respect his desire to help. Asan had a point, and one he might not have heeded a few days ago. I think it's my fault you were killed. He'd never spoken his regrets aloud. It felt wrong, like he was admitting they were real. I tried to protect you. I was so afraid of losing you. I didn't let you grow on your own. I didn't let you fight when you should have. You faced someone stronger, and I wasn't there. The bastard didn't just kill you, he tortured you. He crushed the bones in your arms and hands, he took from you everything you had pride in. He grit his teeth, lifting a shaking hand to his face. He pushed his hair out of his eyes, letting out a trembling breath. Chad placed himself in front of him, not letting him look away. Ichigo swallowed, his throat tight, and Chad's voice was softer than usual, forcing Ichigo to listen. Ichigo, if I fell fighting with you, then I died without regrets. Don't blame yourself for something you didn't do. He lifted his hand, tightening it into a fist. If it's my weakness that scares you, help me get stronger. I want to fight with you. Ichigo didn't understand. He was happy to have his loyalty, but he didn't understand why. What did I ever do to deserve this? Chad lowered his fist, but the determination in his eyes hadn't faded. You're a good man. Do I need another reason? Chad really believed that, and it was enough he thought he might be able to believe it too. He promised, I'll make you stronger. I've never met anyone in my life more deserving of power. He held up his hand, and Chad took it, his grip unyielding. He couldn't help but smile. Chad wasn't so different, he still foolishly threw his entire soul into helping him. Ichigo wouldn't let that loyalty go to waste. He let go, his gratitude present in his smile. As soon as I can swing it, you're coming with me to Hogyoku Mundo. Hogyoku Mundo. It's the home of the Hollows. It's important, it'll help you understand what you are. He saw the questions written on Chad's face, but the giant of a man trusted him, and he didn't ask. Promise me this, Chad. If I'm ever about to do something stupid, beat some sense into me. Chad smiled. It's a promise, Ichigo. He let the conversation lapse into comfortable silence, simply enjoying his company. He skipped some rocks and enjoyed the sunshine, something he didn't often get to do. It had been a little over an hour by the time they got back, just in time for an argument, it seemed. Kazuki's shop was loud, what with Rukia and Renji shouting with each other with Orihime stuck in the middle. All that stopped when Renji saw Ichigo. Are you some kind of idiot? Nice to see you too, Renji. Ichigo kicked off his shoes and stepped in, not at all bothered by Renji's attitude. Why the fuck did you go to Hogyoku Mundo without permission? You have any idea what kind of shit you stirred up? Ah, that explained the arguing. Ichigo raised a brow, playing dumb. I have a feeling you're about to tell me. They're sending captains out to question you, you could be tried for treason. Now everyone was quiet, even Yoruichi was watching in her cat form from Kazuki's shoulder. Great, an audience. Just what he wanted. Stop shouting. Renji, I'm right here. He put his hands in his pockets, his blase copyright attitude clearly only antagonizing the Fukutecho. He might have doubts about some of the decisions he was about to make, but claiming Hueco Mundo wasn't one of them. Why aren't you taking this seriously? Rukia stuck her neck out for you twice, don't you care? Ichigo struck him with a look that shut the Shinigami up. I went alone and without warning for a reason. I acted alone, no one can contest that. You were all here when Kazuki removed the hogyoku. Renji seemed surprised he'd thought that far, but he still had reason to be confused and upset. So why did you go? He debated answering, but putting it off was likely pointless. They would all probably know by the end of today anyways. He sighed, running his hand through his hair. To take Hueco Mundo by force. I'm king now. Renji stared at him in shock, then looked at Rukia. She didn't look surprised, and that was all the confirmation he seemed to need. He looked back at Ichigo. Why, you're not serious? You're siding with hollows. You can't mean. I'm not so different from them, Renji. His eyes bled black in warning. The Fukutecho started to sweat, taking a swift step back. It wasn't a threat, just a pointed reminder he was a bit more than a Shinigami. He blinked, pushing his hollow power away. Don't tell me Soul Society was just going to let Aizen's army off scot-free. I know better. Renji grit his teeth, struggling to find the words to articulate what he wanted to say. Rukia stepped in, her brows drawn. So you're protecting them, why? He answered, because they don't deserve to die. Renji demanded, how can you know that? I've fought them before. You can't be this naive, they're hollows, they. Renji. He hadn't raised his voice, but there was authority laced through his voice. He hadn't intended to spill his guts in front of an audience, damn Renji for that, but the only thing that might make him shut him up was the truth. Or at least a part of it. I didn't make this choice lightly. The Arrancar I've let live spilled my blood, yours, Rukia's. They beat Orihime, they tortured me, Rukia, Chad, you. I'm under no delusion that they are kind, they are what they are. Renji's eyes widened, not understanding, and the others were conspicuously silent. Ichigo ignored his friends, but he could feel their attention on him. These were questions they likely wanted answered as well. Renji asked, if they did all that, how can you protect them? Because I understand them, in a way he couldn't just ignore. Don't be too aghast, Renji, I killed the Arrancar that were too unstable, and if any defy me, they'll die too. His eyes narrowed. The Arrancar are mine, Soul Society does not command me. Renji seemed sufficiently cowed, but Rukia wasn't. She stepped forward, searching his eyes. Do you want a war? Why are you doing this? His tone softened, some of the tension draining from his shoulders. Of course not, Rukia. I'm doing this because I hate war. Kazuki stepped in to try to defuse the argument, and Ichigo let him, watching the ex-captain impassively. Kurosaki-san has a point. Who better to command Hueco Mundo than a half-Shinigami that has reason to protect the human world? He looked to Ichigo. You've put yourself in a position where you can't be ignored. I don't know if that's clever, or insanity. Ichigo gave Kazuki a thoughtful look. I can't tell if that's an insult or not. He lifted his hand, raking his fingers through his hair in a pathetic attempt to diffuse his own tension. I know what I'm doing, Renji, Rukia. Now can we dial it down a notch and have lunch? I haven't eaten in days. And if he was about to be spiritually banished to Hueco Mundo, he'd like to eat something normal first. Renji frowned at him, then scoffed, you're impossible. Rukia didn't look happy either, but she relented. Ichigo finally spared a glance for Orihime, noting the sliver of fear in her eyes. He supposed the Kurosaki she knew didn't casually leave to kill Arrancar and promise to do it again. He wasn't sure, he didn't remember who he used to be. They had lunch, and Ichigo pretended not to notice the tension in the others. Their conversation stayed as light as possible, none of them willing to drag it back to where it had been. The only three who seemed to be relaxed were Kazuki, Yoruichi, and Chad. He wasn't even done before Kazuki drew out a buzzing phone, and drew it to their attention that three captains had just passed through a Senkaimon. Seemed his moment of peace was fleeting. He'd been hoping to go home before this, but that seemed too much to ask. He got up to go meet them, and for all of their peace of mind, he stayed in his body. The keychain Kazuki had lent him would be adequate to kick himself out of it, but what better way to protect his body than to actually be in it? He could use hogyoku if he had to, he just wasn't as good at it as Ishida. He didn't trust Soul Society, but he didn't think they would go so far as to try to kill his living body. Rukia and Renji insisted on going with him, and he honestly wasn't sure if it was because they had been ordered to or not. The closer he got to their meeting place, the more he focused. He could sense Shunsui's and Yukitaki's energy, and that was proof enough that Yamamoto wasn't pleased. He wasn't surprised to feel Byakuya's reiatsu. Since Rukia was here, he probably would have talked his way into coming even if he wasn't chosen, and he was a stickler for the rules. He probably knew the laws better than Yamajii himself. He tracked them to an empty lot filled with nothing but weeds, drying grass, and some piles of dirt. It was big enough to host a fight if it came to it, but Ichigo hoped it wouldn't. The three captains' howry shifted in the breeze. It was a hot, pleasant day, scattered clouds casting shadows on the town as they crawled overhead. It was nothing like Hueco Mundo. He didn't know why he kept comparing things to it. He noted how tense the three captains looked. Shunsui actually looked on guard, Yukitaki was frowning, and Byakuya actually looked concerned. He decided that wasn't a bad thing, at least they were taking him seriously. He stopped a good 50 feet away for their sakes, his hands in his pockets. He said nothing, he waited for them to speak first since they were the ones that demanded this. Shunsui looked almost sad, his hands in his sleeves as he stepped forward. Kurosaki-kun, I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Ichigo shrugged a shoulder. Ah, I know, might as well skip the pleasantries. He could feel Rukia and Renji's unease in their reiatsu, but he pretended not to notice. The two stood to the side, acting under the decorum a lieutenant might take while sitting in on a captain's meeting. Shunsui spoke in the tone all official business demanded, keeping his emotions out of it. You went against orders and opened a garganta to Hueco Mundo, where you remained for nearly 72 hours. What were your intentions? Ichigo narrowed his eyes, but still appeared to be relaxed. He didn't fear them. He knew their Zanpakuto, their power, their personalities. He had the advantage here, and they knew it. My intention was to claim Hueco Mundo for myself. I succeeded. The trio stared at him in shock, and he elaborated before they could ask more questions. I killed the Arrancar that stood in my way, I recruited the Espada, and I killed the king. His eyes darkened. Hueco Mundo is mine. Any Shinigami that steps foot in my desert will die. Byakuya started. You cannot. I'm not done. He shot Byakuya a warning look and the noble fell into silence. In return, the hollows I command will leave both humans and Shinigami alone. Yukitaki's eyes narrowed in disbelief. You can't possibly control so many. Ichigo let his eyes bleed black, his irises shining gold. They were still under the impression they were talking to a human. That assumption was wrong. I'm perfectly capable of punishing a subordinate. Zangetsu's voice echoed just beneath his own, his hollow itching to fight, but he still hoped it wouldn't come down to that. Byakuya's brows fell in real anger. You defied an order, you can't expect there won't be consequences. He answered Byakuya, but his eyes didn't leave Shunsui's. I was never yours to control. Shunsui sighed. I see. He looked up at the clouds for a moment, then returned his attention to Ichigo to ask, I don't suppose there's room for negotiation. Don't test me, I'm being generous. He really didn't have any wiggle room, and he desperately hoped Yamajii didn't test his resolve on the issue. He wasn't bluffing when he said he would kill any Shinigami that stepped into Hueco Mundo. If he wanted to earn the loyalty of the Arrancar, he couldn't afford to look weak, and he couldn't make exceptions. Shunsui asked, what reassurances can you give us that you don't intend to follow through on Aizen's initial plan? How do we know you aren't amassing power to invade Soul Society? His eyes narrowed to slits at the mere insinuation he might have anything to do with Aizen. Zangetsu screamed in his head, but he didn't oblige his desires. He let out a slow, steadying breath, not trusting himself to speak until he calmed down. When he did speak, he sounded calmer than he felt. You have no other proof besides my word, and I have no other proof I can give. Ichigo lifted a shoulder in a slight shrug. Shadow me in the human world if you must, but stay out of Hogyoku Mundo. In return I'll extend the same courtesy. The human world was still neutral ground for Shinigami, they weren't allowed to interfere. Given he still had a living body, he got special privileges. Shunsui frowned. Is that arrogance, or confidence? Neither, Shunsui. It was hard to talk to him like he was a stranger. He'd never known Shunsui very well, but he was no stranger to him. For better or worse, Aizen made us, he shaped us, and I'm doing my best to keep us alive. You don't have to understand it. I'm telling you Soul Society has no authority over us. Shunsui stared back, weighing his answer, then sighed again. How tiresome. Yama-jii isn't going to like this. The old man can bite me. Chill out, they're not our enemy. Still don't like them. He doesn't have to like it, it's how it is. Hogyoku Mundo is mine, and I'll defend it until I'm struck down. Shunsui looked at Ichigo, not as a king, a visored, or a ryoka, but as a young man. That's a lot for someone so young to shoulder. Ichigo felt Zangetsu rage, his hollow and his Quincy side finding that statement to be deeply ironic. He couldn't help but feel bitter. They blamed him for what he was, but they played their part all the same. Who do you think put that weight there? Shunsui and Yukitake looked confused more than anything, but he didn't feel inclined to explain. He huffed and straightened, realizing Zangetsu's instincts had him leaning forward. Don't make me kill anyone. It came out as less of a demand and more of a plea, but they saw him kill Aizen with ease, he knew they would understand that wasn't a bluff. He was relying on his strength in the hopes they would leave him in Hogyoku Mundo alone. Yukitake spoke up. If you aren't gathering power to attack Soul Society, then what need could you have of it? You're strong enough on your own. Ichigo considered what to tell him, his hands still firmly in his pockets. Consider it a precaution for the future. He didn't have anything concrete to tell them, but he hoped if they saw him gathering power, they would react in kind out of fear. He needed everyone to be stronger. He didn't want any of his old friends to die, even if he didn't really know them anymore. He could be the bad guy if he had to be. Shunsui frowned, genuine sadness in his eyes. You're not making this easy, kid. Ichigo snorted, insulted. Nothing worth doing is easy. He thought he saw Yukitake smile, but it was hard to tell. Shunsui straightened some. I'll take your demands to the Saotaicho. Expect a response by midday tomorrow. I'll be here. Shunsui's shoulders relaxed, but just a fraction. He glanced over at Rukia and Renji, both of which straightened to attention. Oi, you coming or staying? Rukia practically shouted. I would like to remain here, Taicho. Renji looked from Rukia to Byakuya, the Taicho turning to open the Senkaimon. Stay with Rukia, Renji. Why yes, Taicho. Ichigo tried not to groan at how uptight the pair were. At least he knew they would grow out of it. The absurdity lessened the sting of Byakuya being uncertain if he would harm his sister or not. The three captains left through the Senkaimon, and Ichigo let his grip on his hollow power slip away. His head fell back with a slow exhale, the field cast into shadow by a passing cloud. He stood there long enough that Rukia apparently started to get concerned. He heard her voice from behind him, nearly within arm's reach. Ichigo. He knew she was there, but he was glad she didn't get any closer. He looked over at her, waiting for her to continue. Did you mean what you said? Yeah. Her face fell, and he knew it wasn't the answer she'd been hoping for. Sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do. You should know that, Rukia. His tone was gentle, not accusatory. With her past concerning Kaien, he thought she might understand. Her brows furrowed. This isn't the same. You're turning your back on Soul Society, you're making them an enemy. Fuck this, let me talk. He muttered aloud to himself. Zangetsu. His hollow insisted. No, I wanna talk. He sorted through the hollow's feelings, and it really did seem like he was just concerned, in his own way. He could tell him no, but he hardly ever asked to speak, he had to have a reason. He looked over at Renji, then Rukia in warning. Zangetsu wants out, don't panic. Renji frowned in confusion. You're Zanpakuto. Rukia elaborated. His hollow. Renji blanched, and Ichigo didn't bother going through the song and dance, he just let Zangetsu push forward into his mind. It was almost a relief to let him take over, his perspective shifting so he was a spectator. He could take back control whenever he wanted, but he trusted Zangetsu to back off when he asked. Ichigo's posture changed, his eyes reflecting the black and gold of Zangetsu. His hollow lifted his hand to rub his neck, lips curling with a snarl. Don't know how you can just shrug that off, King, fucking hurts. I didn't swap with you so you could bitch. He was good at shrugging off pain, and a stiff neck from stress and bad sleep were just a drop in the bucket when it came to his problems. Rukia took a step back, a bit intimidated, and in response, Renji stepped forward. He stated the obvious, you're not Ichigo. Zangetsu sneered. Duh, dumbass, he warned you for a reason. He stepped forward, getting into Renji's personal space. You've got no idea the shit this idiot goes through to protect you sorry bastards. Renji argued, you're a hollow, you're probably just using him. The swell of rage Ichigo felt concerned him. They both knew that wasn't true, but Zangetsu had a temper, his temper, and he didn't often see a need to curb it. Zangetsu. The hollow leaned in close, eyes narrowing in the desire for violence. He left his hands in his pockets, trying to lessen the urge. Zangetsu hissed, there ain't anyone alive that wants to protect King more than I do. If I thought killin' ya would help, you'd be dead. Renji swallowed and leaned back, and Ichigo actually felt a little sorry for him. Being on the other end of Zangetsu's anger wasn't a pleasant experience, they were both lucky they couldn't feel their reiatsu. Zangetsu leaned back a fraction, looking at Rukia, then Renji. Now listen, ya fucking idiots, if there's one thing King understands, it's hollows. Fear washed over him and he pushed to take back control, but to his surprise, Zangetsu pushed back. You wouldn't. You won't tell them, you'll never tell them, and if you push your friends away, we all suffer for it. So shut up and let me talk. Ichigo pushed again for good measure, but Zangetsu didn't relent. If Ichigo really fought back he could overthrow him, but that he was resisting at all was proof enough this was important to him. He stopped pressuring his hollow, and Zangetsu turned his attention back to Rukia and Renji. I'm only gonna say this once so pay attention. King and I killed the bastard that tortured us just in time to get front and center seats to watchin' his sisters be shredded. Aizen made fucking sure he saw, that he heard. His mind snapped, he couldn't take it, and he spent the better part of 2 years feral in that goddamn desert. Soul Society turned their back on him, he was alone. Do you understand? The pair heard Zangetsu, but they both knew they couldn't understand, all they could hope for was for them to try. He knew his relationship with his inner spirits was unconventional. Now they knew why. That fucking war lasted a decade for a reason. We lost. Badly. We're still trying to put him back together, and I won't let King fall apart again. Now Ichigo understood what Zangetsu was doing. Just hearing him say it made his chest ache, cringing back from the truth. King, you can't pretend that shit never happened, you're only getting worse. Rukia looked ill, and Renji couldn't seem to settle on an emotion. He knew the two had been there when he'd killed Aizen, and he knew they had been disturbed by his brutality. He hadn't killed Aizen out of any real sense of duty, he'd done it out of vengeance, and a desperate, mad desire to prevent the future from coming to pass. Zangetsu snarled, screw your pity, I'm tellin' ya because I want you to understand, King ain't doin' this for himself. Ya think he wants a pack of bloodthirsty Arrancar at his throat the rest of his life. Think for one fucking second. He curled his lips in disgust, taking a step back. Aren't ya supposed to be his friends? Help him, or for fuck's sake, I'll make sure you can't ever hurt him again. Rukia looked like she'd been struck. He had no doubt she believed she was helping, but Zangetsu didn't see it that way, and he would lie to himself and say it didn't hurt. Ichigo pushed Zangetsu back in his mind, the darkness clearing from his eyes. He almost pitched forward, suddenly off balance. He straightened, fixing them both with a wide-eyed look that bordered on shame. They didn't need to ask if it was true. Ichigo, the look on Rukia's face made his chest tight. He had to look somewhere else, anywhere else. Don't look at me like that. Did Soul associate ya? Renji didn't finish his question, they all knew what he was going to ask. It still hurt, even after all those years. He tried his damnedest not to think about it, but Zangetsu was right, and his hollow was doing everything in his power to protect them and their crumbling world. He shoved his hands in his pockets, hiding how badly they were shaking. Is it so surprising? You saw what they did to Kazuki, what they nearly did to Rukia. He lifted his shoulders in a stiff shrug, trying and failing to play off how much it hurt. When I escaped, I was more hollow than human. I was Mia in enemy territory, a place Shinigami aren't even meant to be in the first place. I didn't know how to make a Garganta back then. I couldn't leave, and Aizen knew it. The smug Sanuva bitch. He didn't think Aizen had planned for him to escape, but he'd certainly made the best of it. If I'm being logical, Soul Society did the right thing, but I can't keep my emotions out of it. L can't just step aside and trust them. He wasn't even sure if he trusted Rukia anymore. He trusted who she was, but if she came up behind him when he wasn't paying attention, he wasn't sure if he would hurt her or not. They both could barely come to grips with what he was. At best, in his time, they had pretended he was the same. He looked around at Karakura with a small frown. This place hasn't felt like home in a long time. Rukia's voice was soft. But your family is here. Your sisters, your friends. I know. I tried to pretend things could go back to how they were, but that was stupid of me. I don't think I belong here anymore. Karakura felt small, crowded, loud, fragile. Karen and Yuzu were growing into their own spiritual power. His father was still around to watch them, and he knew Kazuki would keep a close watch on them as well. He loved his sisters, but he could protect them better from a distance. He was just going to cause them pain. Renji crossed his arms, struggling to articulate his thoughts. You don't act like any hollow I've ever fought. Even the actual hollow in you isn't what I expected. I don't know what I'm trying to say, just you're not a monster. Don't get me wrong, you've got monstrous Reiatsu, and you're as brutal as Kenpachi, but I think your heart's in the right place. I can't say I understand you, but after what they almost did to Rukia, I'm not feeling too keen on Soul Society either. The redhead looked away, feeling a touch self-conscious now that he noticed he had Rukia and Ichigo's undivided attention. If you think this is what you need to do, I feel like an idiot for saying this, but I've got your back, Kurosaki. Ichigo's brows fell, not having expected that, and from Renji no less. Rukia relented. I don't think I approve, Ichigo, but I won't argue with you. You're doing what you feel is right, I can understand that. Just be careful. She looked tired. Going from nearly being executed to another position of powerless was a heap of extra stress he didn't intend to shove off on her. She was far from weak, but there was only so much someone could take, and he didn't mean to be the one to add to it. I will. His voice was low, still uncomfortable having the discussion so focused on him. Thanks. Renji blushed, looking away with a mutter. It's not a big deal. Rukia gave him a small, sad smile. I'm sorry. If we can help you, don't leave us in the dark. Ichigo forced himself not to look away. I'll try to remember that. It was as honest an answer as he could give. It was hard to remember he wasn't alone anymore. He jerked his head in the direction of Kazuki's shop. You guys go ahead, I was gonna stop at home. He was proud of himself for not tripping over that word, home. He had a lot he needed to get done before Soul Society's inevitable answer, and he couldn't be away for Hueco Mundo for long. If he could swing manifesting Zangetsu in Hueco Mundo while he was away, he would do it in a heartbeat, but unfortunately their range was limited. Rukia seemed hesitant, and he gave her a smile. I'm okay. He tapped his temple. They're watching. Zangetsu and Asan were watching very closely. They were looking out for him, they always were. Rukia and Renji were still hesitant, but they left, and he was alone with his thoughts in the sunshine. He hurt. Ichigo closed his eyes. He remembered the desert. He remembered devouring hollows, fighting, killing, running. It was a sorry existence until he took back his mind. Zangetsu drew out all the memories he hadn't wanted to face. He whispered, "You bastarda." His heart wasn't in it, and Zangetsu knew it. The hollow is right, Ichigo. Every day you deny this pain only twists the knife deeper. Now that he was once again alone and there was no one to see, he let the tears fall. He grit his teeth, angry at himself. Pathetic. Not pathetic, King. You survived. The better predator, the stronger monster. He stood there in the sun until he stopped shaking, his heart still heavy. He turned and started walking home, hoping he didn't look as awful as he felt. He hadn't wanted to go home like this, but he was running out of time. How he could go back in time and have so little of it was a mystery. No regrets. Keep moving forward. Masks. Quote quote. Ichigo knew it couldn't be helped, but even more time was stolen from him. It wasn't like he expected everyone else to put their lives on hold over him, but his luck was awful. Yuzu was studying with friends, Karen had a soccer game, and Ishun was with a patient, some kid that got too rambunctious and had a broken arm to show for it. He waited in the sitting room, bouncing his knee. Rude, maybe, but he was antsy, and he didn't really have time to spare sitting around. His father was his usual bubbly, obnoxious self, but he could see that it was false. He acted stupid, but he was more perceptive than he let on. He had no doubt he'd sensed the captains, and since he didn't think Kazuki had told Ishun what was happening, it was up to Ichigo to explain. His dad waved the kid and his mother off, giving him a sweet before the mother ushered the boy away in his new cast. He watched them go a moment, then turned to face Ichigo, his smile evaporating. Ichigo stood, waiting for his father to speak first. Ishun gave him a long, hard look, then asked, "What did you do?" It wasn't accusatory, but Ichigo couldn't help but feel it would be justified if it was. Ichigo rubbed his neck, looking out the window. He pretended his dad's opinion didn't matter to him, but he cared a good deal about what he had to say. Seeing him so concerned made him feel guilty. "I went against orders and conquered Hueco Mundo. I killed the king and took his place." Ishun gripped his shirt, forcing him to look his father in the eyes. "You did what?" He wasn't going to change his mind and he didn't regret it, but he was still his father, and his disapproval stung. "Oyaji, I know what I'm doing." Ishun studied him, his frown deepening, and he let him go with a mutter, "You really are my son, aren't you?" He rubbed his brow, pacing for a moment. Ichigo knew his father understood what he'd told him. He wouldn't be able to assert control if he wasn't actually in Hueco Mundo. "What are you going to tell your sisters?" Ichigo didn't know, he really was a shitty older brother. "I'll still visit, it's not forever." Ishun just stared at him like he was waiting for him to say more. His voice broke. "What do you want me to say? I don't want to hurt them, I can't stay here." Ishun's expression didn't change, he was still searching him for an answer. He asked, "What are you afraid of, Ichigo?" Why did he have to see straight through him? "I don't want to hurt Yuzu or Karen, my friends, or you." He got this power to protect them, and now he was betrayed by it. If he wasn't himself and he struck to kill, they wouldn't be able to stop him. It would be like drowning kittens. "Do you really think you would?" Ishun was asking him an honest question, one that he didn't want to answer. "I already have. I can't stay here." "Do you want to stay?" The question caught Ichigo off guard, eyes widening. Ishun was still watching him with that same steady expression. There was no pity, or fear or judgment. He had to look away, the truth hurt. "No." Ishun put a hand on his shoulder, and to his surprise, he didn't jump or tense. "Ichigo, you're an adult now, I can't force you to do anything, and you wouldn't listen to me anyways, but I trust you. You do what you need to." He squeezed his shoulder, and Ichigo braved looking back. "You can always come home." Ichigo's heart clenched, swallowing past the lump in his throat. Ishun's hand fell away, and it was a moment before he trusted himself to speak. "Ah, I know, Oyaji." Ishun finally smiled. "I'm proud of you." The words were so simple, but they meant the world to him. They both argued and talked a lot of shit, but he looked up to him. His father was strong, and now that he'd surpassed him, he still couldn't help but think he hadn't lived up to his expectations. He wasn't a doctor like his dad, he wasn't even a good Shinigami, but he'd told him he was proud of him, and he'd meant it. Ishun's smile fell a bit and he reluctantly turned the conversation back to business. What did the old man have to say about all this? "He doesn't trust me," Ichigo snorted. "Obviously. Shunsui's taking my message back to him now. I'll know by tomorrow what he plans to do, but I can guess." "What did you tell them?" He answered flatly, "That I'll kill any Shinigami that steps foot in my territory, but in return, the Arrancar will remain in Hueco Mundo." Ishun's eyes widened. "Oh, I can't imagine he'll take that well." He doesn't have anyone strong enough to take me into custody, so yeah, I imagine he wouldn't. Talking about something that wasn't his feelings was a welcome change. He didn't want to be crying like a bitch when he went back to Hueco Mundo, that was just plain stupid. Ishin grimaced, surely you had a bit more tact than that. A bit, he shrugged guiltily. I was angry. Ishin said, you can follow through on that promise. Ichigo didn't think his father was actually doubtful, just clarifying. His eyes narrowed, if they cross me, they'll die. His father asked, you sound like you've done this before. Ichigo shifted, stuffing his hands in his pockets again. Sort of. Ishin waited for him to keep talking, so he didn't disappoint. I spent a lot of time in Hueco Mundo alone. I know how this shit works. Not as long as a born Ajukas, not even close, but he'd always had a steep learning curve. Alone. Why? Ichigo's expression fell, but he found that now that his emotions were already so raw, it wasn't so painful to think about. He wasn't sure his father really knew what he was asking him for, but he didn't feel like lying or blowing him off, he wanted him to know. Aizen got me. Those words had a look crossing his face that Ichigo had never seen on his father before. His father looked distressed, murderous, angry. He looked away, not certain he wanted to see his reaction. I'm not really sure what they were doing, but it hurt. My hollow got stronger. It was hard to think. Maybe the surge in my instincts was from the pain, or maybe it was the hogyoku. I don't know, but he did it on purpose. Zale pushed and he pushed, and I finally killed him. He finally shut up. He couldn't censor the satisfaction from his voice. He didn't have many good dreams, but killing Zale was one of them. Aizen knew I escaped. I wasn't subtle. At all. I wanted to go home, but stopped me. He had Yuzu and Karen. He dropped his head to his head, clenching his teeth. He stopped there. He couldn't say those words aloud, he couldn't. Things are fuzzy after that. He looked at Ishin's feet, not moving when his father came up and pulled him into a loose embrace. He moved slow, giving him plenty of time to reject it if he wished. Ichigo stiffened, but didn't pull away, dropping his head to his father's shoulder. He didn't cry, he was so far beyond tears. Ishin held him, his hand on his back, but he was family, he was safe, and the gentle churning of his reiatsu was a comfort. Ichigo. He didn't seem to be able to finish his sentence, and Ichigo knew he didn't need to. They stood there for a few minutes in mutual silence. He knew his father felt guilty, responsible, because he would feel responsible too. He was indeed his father's son. That deep loneliness in his heart didn't ache so much that he couldn't breathe. His family was still here, they were safe, and it made his memories feel like a horrible nightmare. He finally leaned back, reluctant to pull away, but he really did need to go. For all his father's exceedingly loud theatrics, neither seemed willing to acknowledge that moment aloud. Tell Yuzu and Karen I'll be back soon. If things don't go badly, tomorrow. Stay safe, Ichigo. Yeah, he didn't think he'd have the strength to leave if he lingered. He turned and left the clinic, feeling a bit numb, but not in a bad way. He was actually surprised that the usual commentary from Zangetsu had been suspiciously absent. You were doing what I wanted, didn't have any complaints. He returned to Kazuki's shop, and after a few words of reassurance to Rukia and Renji, he kicked himself out of his body. He left himself in Kazuki's capable hands, then jumped up on platforms of reishi to the sky. He let out a steadying breath, calming himself as best he could. Zangetsu. It was all he had to say, before his hollow power was once again front and center. The change was getting easier. Accepting his hollow power had only become easier recently, but the distance from his emotions was a welcome price to pay. He tore a hole in the world. Ichigo had been careful to open his garganta some miles away from Las Noches. It was possible to follow the energy after a gate closed for a short period, and he wasn't going to take chances when it came to his family. He circled Las Noches from a distance, and even with his speed, it took about an hour. He made it full circle and still didn't sense Neliel. He was a little concerned, but he'd already wasted too much time searching. He ran back to Las Noches, giving up for the time being. He just had to believe he'd find her again. Once inside the dome of Las Noches, he became aware of two things. For one, the air was thick with reiatsu. which meant a good deal of fighting had gone on in the short time he was away. He wasn't pleased about that. The second was that he was recognized on sight, and the results of that were annoying. Any low-ranking Arrancar he passed either bowed or practically grovelled, dropping to a knee and making very certain not to make eye contact. A part of him, the hollow part, was pleased by this, but ultimately he just found it to be needless. For the time being, he ignored it. He stopped before one at random, and the poor thing was shaking like a leaf. "Calm down, I ain't gonna kill ya. Gather the espada, and the queen." "Understood, Heika. Where should I send them?" "Above the dome." He didn't intend to ever use that fucking meeting room. If it didn't feel so childish, he might have just destroyed it. Hell, maybe he'd destroy it anyways. He left the Arrancar alone, speeding through the halls unnoticed. He passed by the massive hole in Las Noches that had become Neutra's grave, noting that the reishi in the environment was already fixing the floors and pillars. It was a slow process, but the destruction was a touch less jagged. As he circled Las Noches, he noted the scars of what appeared to have been some skirmishes, but he didn't linger long enough to determine whose Reiatsu it was. It was enough that all the espada he'd last seen alive were still alive. He could sense the espada scattered throughout. Once he'd seen all he needed to, he went through the hole in the dome he'd made the day prior to wait. The espada were fast, but his messenger wasn't. He fully expected this might take a while, and that was ideal. He stood and waited in silence, the slight chill of the desert a familiar comfort. It wasn't silent for long. "King, what? Can we kill? I am." "Not yet. We can't forget about Araniero either." They were still unsure how to handle that one. He hadn't been all that strong to begin with, which was why he'd relied on psychological tricks to get an edge up on Rukia. If she had been at the top of her game, the outcome would have been very different. Even if he felt inclined to let the Arrancar live, he had two heads, and they had differing personalities and ideas. Controlling and predicting him might prove to be difficult. Ichigo sensed Zamari behind him first, but he didn't acknowledge him. He kept his guard up because he was by far the fastest of the espada, but he wasn't really concerned by him. Besides being arrogant, he wasn't much of a threat once you took away his speed. The next to show up was Ulquiorra and Haribel. Both continued the trend of silence, although Haribel stood closer to him, just behind him. Next was Araniero and Zale, whom he carefully ignored, then Grimjow. Unsurprisingly, Stark and Lilinet were last. He finally turned to face them, giving Grimjow a quick once-over. The Sexta Arrancar noticed the attention, straightening a little. He was doing better, it seemed. He had his usual stalking posture and violently bored expression back. He looked between the espada, not wasting time with pleasantries. "So who's dead?" He was annoyed, but not necessarily surprised. There was a power vacuum, and until they fought out their differences, he'd expected some casualties. He could have just chosen replacements, but that would only generate animosity. Haribel answered, 9 numero Arrancar, Chiruchi fell to Araniero, and Grimjow lost Nakim. To who? Grimjow answered, so Ichigo assumed Haribel hadn't known. Shiyelaporo. He filled in the blanks easily enough. Clearly the Privern Espada wanted to try to fight her way to being an Espada again and had lost. Which meant Araniero might be stronger than Zale at that point. He could guess what had happened between Zale and Nakim, but what mattered was how truthful he would be about it. He looked at Zale, and the Espada took a wary step back. Maybe he wasn't doing as good of a job hiding his desire to kill him after all. He asked, who initiated the fight? Zale readjusted his glasses, clearly nervous. Nakim. He sensed Grimjow raging over that answer, the Espada's Reiatsu spiking. His eyes narrowed. Tried to take out Grimjow, didn't you? Zale opened his mouth to defend himself, but he didn't get far. Ichigo was in front of him in an instant, a clawed finger pressing up into the vulnerable flesh beneath his jaw. He tilted his head up, forcing him to make eye contact. Lying by omission is still lying. Zale swallowed, forcing Ichigo's claw to break the skin. Blood welled around his finger, streaking down his neck. His eyes tracked the blood until it stopped at the edge of his coat, tilting his head back farther, forcing him to bare his throat. Zale stopped breathing, eyes wide. Do it, King. Blow his fucking brains out. What are you doing? Zanjetsu's screeching wasn't helping. It would be so easy to kill him. He desperately wanted to, but in this timeline he had no reason any of the Espada would understand, and Kazuki's words kept coming back to him. He wanted him dead so badly, but was what he wanted actually what he needed? He let him go, and it took immense effort to will himself to do so. Don't do it again. Zale stood there, sweating, and simply nodded, fearful speaking would only earn him attention he didn't want. The other Espada took all this in stride, so he could only conclude they were used to it after Aizen. Ichigo took a few steps away, and unsurprisingly the distance didn't seem to help Zale relax. If you're going to fight, try not to kill each other. Grimmjow growled, it ain't a fight unless the other guy doesn't get back up. Ichigo let out an annoyed sigh. Let me rephrase that. Don't kill each other. You're fucking useless if you're dead. I don't give a damn if you fight out your differences, but don't be a nuisance. He glared at Araniero. You ate Chiruchi. Araniero didn't even try to lie. Yes. Then at least the power wasn't wasted. He didn't like Araniero at all, but he still had room to evolve, and he couldn't think of a good reason to kill him either. Haribel finally spoke up. We still have no Cero, Segunda, Quinto, or Diaz Espada. Do you intend to promote an Arrancar? You know better than I do who's the strongest in your fracciones. You're all varying levels of weak to me, it's hard to tell. Grimmjow growled under his breath. Bastard. Ichigo had to admit, he liked that Grimmjow didn't cower. It was nice to see someone talk back at him, not that he didn't get plenty from Zangetsu. He had to wonder how Aizen hadn't killed him right off the bat with an attitude like that. You can be offended when you get stronger. My ability to sense Reiatsu isn't very refined. It wasn't a real weakness, and they would find out anyway. How do these numbers work anyway? Grimmjow said, they go from Diaz to Cero, dumbass. Ulquiorra said, being loud only makes you sound stupid. Grimmjow ground his teeth, and Ichigo wondered how they could possibly still be so sharp. He offered, the numbers are formed with Kido. Ah, I can't use that. He waved a hand in dismissal. Honestly, I don't give a shit about what number you are. If you're proud of it, keep it, I don't care. I'll admit, it's gonna be confusing if the numbers don't match your rank. Stark frowned. You look a little like a Shinigami. I thought Shinigami knew Kido. His Shihakusha was streaked with white, but Stark wasn't wrong, he did still look like a Shinigami, minus the horns, hollow hole, and black stripes. I ain't that kind of Shinigami. Honestly, his control was just too shit to accurately and delicately do anything with Kido. I could kill you with Kido, but I ain't fancy. Zamari spoke up from the back, near Araniero. If we can't fight meaningfully, what rank do we hold? I'm not going to rank you based on power. If that were the case, Ulquiorra would be Cero, Stark would be Primera, and Haribel would remain Trace. Grimmjow snarled, why the fuck would the freak be Cero? Ichigo answered vaguely, you'll see. Ulquiorra gave him a sharp look, but said nothing. Ichigo looked to Stark, do you want to be in charge? No. Ichigo looked at Ulquiorra, do you? No answer. He took that to be a no. Instead of claiming all authority, Ichigo turned it over to Haribel. How would you rank the Espada? She answered calmly, and without hesitation. I will be Cero, Ulquiorra is Primera, Stark and Lilinet are Segunda, Grimmjow is Trace, Zamari is Cuatro, Araniero is Quinto, and Shielapuro is Sexta. Ichigo looked at all the Espada. There you have it. Objections. Grimmjow was actually grinning at the promotion, Zamari looked like he wanted to leave, and Zale looked thoughtful. He thought Stark might actually not be listening, and Lilinet was shockingly quiet. He assumed it had something to do with being surrounded by Arrancar several times her skill level. Good. Then you're all promoted. Any suggestions for who should take the higher numbers? Shalong. Grimmjow sounded so certain, and Haribel didn't dismiss the Arrancar, neither did anyone else. Ichigo said, then Shalong is Septima. He continued, looking to Haribel. I think Octava should be held by all three of your fraction. Chimera Parka is strong, and the three are never apart. Haribel gave him a questioning look, likely wondering how he could know a technique he'd never seen. She closed her eyes. If you deem them worthy. He did, and he thought she was being modest. That monster stood up against captains and had a crushing amount of power. He asked, who else? Zale spoke up, surprising Ichigo. Yilfort. He didn't say it with any level of respect, but maybe offering up a real suggestion was his way of trying to gain favor. He knew he didn't want to die, but he had to wonder how far he'd go to stay alive. Ichigo questioned him, wondering if he had hidden motivations, or if he was being genuine. Your brother. Zale seemed surprised he knew, his brows furrowing. Unfortunately. Grimmjow offered, he's strong. Ichigo made sure there were no objections. Then Yilfort is Novano. Grimmjow looked around, and when no one offered a suggestion, he said, Edrad Leones. He didn't question Grimmjow's choice, and neither did anyone else. Edrad is Diaz. Again, there were no objections. Now that that's out of the way, he moved on, looking to Ulquiorra. We're all the way up here for a reason. Show them. Ulquiorra just stared at him for a long moment, hands in his pockets. If you don't feel like it, we could always fight to get you in the mood. It was a threat if he ever said one. He wasn't feeling all that patient. He wasn't sure if the rebellion was because he was still loyal to Aizen, or if he didn't fully believe Ichigo was stronger. It could just be that he didn't like him, who knew? Ulquiorra just blinked, breaking the tension, and slowly drew his sword. In close, Mercia copyright logo. Wings formed, horns arching from his forehead, his hair growing longer, wilder. Green Reiatsu showering around the Espada. His release was strong enough that the lower-ranking Espada were oppressed by his mere transformation. Ichigo was unaffected, as was Stark and Haribel. He ordered, keep going. Ulquiorra looked like he might refuse, then murmured, Segunda etapa. The explosion of power was immense, every Arrancar present straining against his power. His wings lengthened, his tail curling around him like a deadly whip. His transformation was as impressive as he remembered, his Reiatsu curling around him in thick streaks of black and green. Once upon a time, this form had truly made him despair, but now, it only made him smile. Yes, Ulquiorra was strong. He really did look monstrous like this. Ichigo noted that all the Espada but Stark and Haribel showed signs of fear, and he couldn't blame them. The gap in power between them and himself was uncertain, but they could feel the difference between their own power and Ulquiorra's, and it was vast. This is what a second release looks and feels like. Don't forget it. Ulquiorra flexed his hand, studying Ichigo. He looked ready to attack, but Ichigo wasn't concerned. He disappeared, none of the Espada able to follow his movement, and the trench knife was at Ulquiorra's throat. That will be all, Primera. Ulquiorra's eyes widened, and for a split second he wondered if he would defy him. Then the moment passed and he let his release state go. His Reiatsu dropped off, his Zanpakuto forming in his palm. He sheathed it, his eyes on Ichigo the entire time. Ichigo's tone was flat, but it still held approval. Thank you, Ulquiorra. He turned his back on him, sheathing his own sword. The meaning behind that was clear, I do not fear you. He didn't have Reiatsu the others could feel, it made it hard for them to remember he was stronger. He asked, how did you achieve it? He could only make educated guesses. He might have been born with a hollow, but he was still very different from Arrancar. Ulquiorra's hands returned to his pockets. I destroyed my mask. Grimmjow said, that's suicide. Destroying your mask would kill you. Ulquiorra leveled a condescending look at the Espada, because he was clearly still alive. Ichigo had noticed the lack of fragments. He'd looked less like an Arrancar and more like him. Ulquiorra looked back at Ichigo. That form of yours is similar, is it not? I'm a bit different. He didn't think any of them could argue that point, and he couldn't explain without dropping hints to the fact he was still alive. Human-ish. I accept my mask to become stronger, I don't destroy it. Haribel said, show me. It was the first time she'd truly expressed motivation to get stronger, and Ichigo didn't feel like he should deny her the chance to see. Sure, although, I'm not sure how helpful it will be when you can't sense my Reiatsu. She might have been the one to voice interest, but all the Espada seemed invested. He closed his eyes. Think we can go back a step without letting it all come apart? Che. He took that to be a yes, but he still went slowly, carefully, his power slipping away in shreds of dark Reiatsu. His mask reformed over his face, power lessened, but still plenty to deal with any unruly Espada. He opened his eyes, Pleased he'd managed this form without having to start from scratch to build. It wasn't as stable as he was when he merged with Zangetsu, but it was leagues better than how he'd fared when he first used it. Stark commented, "You're weaker like this." He smiled. Not that they could see it. He was genuinely pleased. "So you can feel that. That's good." Stark had potential, it was just a bit of a shame he had no reason to want to build on it. He explained, "In this form I'm simply using my mask. For Erenkar, you discard it. I think we're opposites, and our second form is a common ground." Zale spoke up, eyes narrowed like it annoyed him that he couldn't explain what he was seeing. "That analysis doesn't appear to be wrong, but I can't explain the hollow hole if what you claim is true. Are you really a Shinigami?" Don't humor the fucker. He's raising a good point. He had to begrudgingly admit that. Sharp. This is only a much weaker version of my second form. At one point in time, all I had was the mask. Limiting my power that much is too difficult. If I was ever severely weakened, it might only manifest as a mask. Like that would ever fucking happen. Don't be arrogant. He addressed them all. Now if you've seen enough, this isn't easy. He was trash at regulating his power. You didn't need to be a genius to see that. No one stopped him, so he saw no reason to continue holding back that dam of power. He let out a slow breath. Now to go back. This was good practice, especially since failure would be catastrophic. His energy spiked, and even if they couldn't feel it, he could tell it raised their hackles to see his energy contained around him in physical form. His mask dissolved, his power sinking back into his bones. Zangetsu was pulled back to the surface of his mind, close enough to touch. He met Haribel's eyes, helpful. She was studying him intently. Yes, any potential debate over his strength seemed settled as well. "I expect all of you to train." He gave Stark a sharp look when he groaned. "We'll talk." He knew the Espada didn't want more power, but he might be able to convince him to try, or at the very least practice control with him, since they could both use it. He continued, his eyes lingering on all of them. "As far as I'm aware, Ulquiorra and I are the first to achieve this. There aren't rules, guidelines, it's up to you to figure it out. You need to get stronger. Aizen made you Erenkar, then didn't allow you to grow. He didn't let you fight, did he?" He knew he hadn't. Aizen had forbidden the Espada to fight one another. He remembered what Kazuki told him, what Aizen pounded into his soul. The only way for a soul to grow stronger is to experience the fear of termination. "I can give you that if that's what you need." They looked thoughtful, casting their eyes from Ulquiorra then back to him. "Train your fraction if you have one, spar with each other, with me. I won't allow you to be weak." "You sure they won't just kill each other? They want power, for one reason or another. They can do this, they'll evolve." Shazel, "We can't. King, we watch the sadistic fuck closely. We can't kill him for no reason. You're dismissed." He shot Haribel a look, letting her know that order wasn't for her, she could do what she wanted. He called, "Grimjow." The Espada stopped mid-turn, his face twisting into an even deeper scowl. He hung back, the Espada around him disappearing in a burst of sonido. Haribel left as well, leaving them standing atop the dome alone. "What do you want?" "Of the Espada, you have the most potential. You have a strong desire to fight, to win. You have good instincts." Grimjow just glowered, Blue's eyes burning. Those are nice eyes. The Espada hated him, he was already obsessed with beating him. "That was good. I want you to be my fraction." His eyes widened in shock. "What?" Ichigo found his surprise to be amusing. "You want to kill me, you don't know when to shut the fuck up, you're perfect." "Fuck you." Ichigo laughed, and that action alone prompted Grimjow to draw his sword. Ichigo didn't reach for his sword, he didn't need it. "You want to be king, right? You want to stand at the top." Grimjow didn't move other than to shift into a stance. He growled, "Fuck you, White." It was strange to heard him call him by a different name, but being on the other end of Grimjow's fury was a familiar experience. "You're starting to repeat yourself." Grimjow rushed forward, slashing with blinding speed, but Ichigo was faster. He dodged, enraging Grimjow further. It was all the proof the cat needed to know he was thoroughly outclassed. He caught his sword in his fist over his head, jerking the blade down, pulling Grimjow closer. He hissed, "Don't waste my time." Ichigo let go of his sword, watching the Espada skip back to release his sword, fingers digging into the blade. Grind, Pantera. Their fight continued with Ichigo dodging and gently countering Grimmjow. Gentle by his standards, throwing him back still carved gouges out of the dome of Las Noches. He appeared behind him, gripping his shoulder and shoving him forward. Grimmjow staggered and whirled, only to find Ichigo's hand on his throat. He froze on instinct, eyes widening. Ichigo made his point. He let him go, asking, "What do you expect to happen?" Grimmjow leapt back, even if the distance between them didn't much matter. "The fuck do you mean? When you get to the top, when you're the best, the strongest." Grimmjow grit his teeth, not offering him any kind of a response. "It's not all it's chalked up to be." Grimmjow recovered, slashing with his claws for his throat. He snarled when it became apparent he had only slashed through his afterimage. "Stop moving. Get faster." He drew the trench knife, humoring Grimmjow. He kept dodging his attacks, but now he started shallowly cutting him as he passed, punishing failure. Zangetsu's desire to draw blood was strong. He couldn't ignore it, but he could go easy on the bloodshed. "Don't go too easy on him, King. He's not healed yet. I could beat the shit out of him now, or piss him off and fight him longer. Letting him rage works out in the long term." Grimmjow shouted, "Would you rather be weak?" Ichigo smiled, disappearing to strike him with the back of his blade in the lower back. The Espada crumpled, falling to his knees and gasping in pain. "Not even close. I'm just telling you, you still won't be satisfied." He stood over him and ordered, "Get up." Grimmjow spun as he stood, raking his claws towards his gut. Ichigo caught his wrist, stopping him short. He ducked under the strike from his other hand, wrenching him around and flipping him to his back. He let go, Grimmjow gasping for air on the ground. Ichigo crouched over him, his blade just a hair's breadth from his forehead. He let it touch the armor there, cracking it under his Reiatsu. "You will get stronger. You're going to fight me every day, until you can actually manage to cut me. I'm going to beat the fuck out of you, Grimmjow. Hate me, curse me, despise me, that's fine. Get stronger." Grimmjow didn't move or acknowledge the blade pressed to his forehead, he just glared. Ichigo let him up, pulling his sword away, and their fight continued. He didn't hit that hard, but he hit him a lot, and after a good long while, Grimmjow couldn't hold his resurrection. His movements grew sluggish, but he was determined to keep fighting, even if the results were rather pathetic. He only stopped when Grimmjow couldn't get up anymore. He was a tired, bloody wreck, but he'd live. It looked much worse than it actually was. The Arrancar panted, lying flat on his back and growled, "I hate you." Ichigo smirked, "I'd be disappointed if you didn't." He sheathed his sword, reaching down and hoisting him up to drape him over his shoulder. "Put me down." He felt his claws rake over his back, but there was no way he'd get through his hierro. "Calm down, kitty." He flashed forward with Sonido, the sudden rush of speed and wind knocking the air out of Grimmjow's lungs. It was also a convenient deterrent from the angry Espada destroying his Shihakusho. Stubborn little shit. He took him to the med wing, unfortunately knowing exactly where it was. He dumped Grimmjow on the ground on his back, the Espada grunting in pain. The few Arrancar medics present jumped, startled, then bowed. He drawled, "Stop groveling. Fix him." They hopped to it, and when one knelt by Grimmjow to heal him, the Espada lashed out. Ichigo was on him in a heartbeat, flattening his forearm underfoot before he could complete his swipe. He warned, "Be still." He leaned hard enough to grind bones together, and to his credit, Grimmjow didn't cry out or fight back. The Arrancar Grimmjow had nearly attacked was shaking like a leaf. He ordered, "Keep going. He won't hurt you." The order snapped them out of it, more afraid of him than they were of the Espada. Grimmjow finally stopped fighting, and he let up off of his arm. Ichigo supervised, watching as the Arrancar healed most of the superficial damage, though there was no replacing his spent Reiatsu. It was slow going, and nowhere near as good as what Orihime could do, but it was passable. Grimmjow glared at him the entire time, and Ichigo pretended not to notice. He finally backed off, crossing his arms and leaning up against the wall. He waited until Grimmjow had enough energy to get up. The Espada growled under his breath, scaring the medics away as he struggled to stand. Satisfied some random numeros wouldn't be able to steal an opportunistic kill on the Espada, Ichigo turned to leave. Hey, where the fuck are you going? He glanced back, but didn't stop. I've got better things to do than babysit you. Asshole, we're not done. We're not. I'll see you tomorrow, Grimjow. He stepped into Sonido, leaving the Espada behind. Stubborn prick, you really going to let him keep talking to y'all like that? If it makes him feel better, who cares? We both know I'm stronger. Grimjow was one of the few Espada he didn't think had the personality to improve rapidly on his own. He lived and breathed violence. Training on his own wasn't going to make him stronger, not unless he had some sort of grudge against sand. Now to convince the laziest and most unwilling Espada to train. Joy. Current Espada ranking. King Strawberry. 0 Harabel. 1 Ulquiorra. 2 Stark and Lilinet. 3 Grimjow. 4 Zamari. 5 Araniero. 6 Shayelaporo. 7 Shalong. 8 Cyan. Mila Rose. Apache Chimera Parka. Aeon. 9 Yilfort. 10 Edrad Leones. Old Espada. 0 Cerro Yami deceased. 2 Segunda Barragan deceased. 5 Quinto Neutra deceased. Lupi deceased. Numeros. Nakim Brindina deceased. Privern Espada. Chiruchi deceased. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.